cold case dating back almost 3 decades has been reopened. Elkhart police are working with Cass County and state police to solve the murder of Ada Haradine. Her son Jeff Haradine joins us along with Lieutenant Cindy Kilgore from Crime Stoppers. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
This has been so long ago, and Jeff, I'm sure as a grown man now, you look back at this and know that there is a missing puzzle to this, to your childhood, really. You were how old when your mom went missing?
I was 8 years old.
Wow. And what do you remember of that day?
Well, I came home from school, got off the school bus, and she was a stay-at-home mom, so she was normally there, of course. And so it was unusual. She wasn't there that day. And a little bit of time passed, and I think I was probably concerned and called my dad at work and told him that I was home alone.
Yeah, and then from there, things quickly changed. You had police at your home, and it must have been a very confusing time for an 8-year-old boy.
Oh, sure, and as you can imagine, it got pretty eventful that evening. You know, we'd normally be having dinner, and the cops are all over the place at the house, so.
Yeah, how terrifying. And then the tragic news, not too terribly long later, well, actually a good amount of time.
3 years later.
3 years later.
Yeah.
That remains were found, and that must have opened up a terrible time for you.
Yeah, I know it was disappointing for me because, as you can imagine, that at that age you always hold out hope that she's going to come back home to you. I think for my dad at the time there was probably a little bit of closure, but for me it was a little disappointing, I know. Cindy,
what can you make of this, and what police are trying to find now after all these years?
You know, I don't know what to make of it. There were no known enemies. That, you know, there was no likely suspect, but what I can say is it's actually sometimes a misnomer to say that the case was reopened, because police throughout these years were investigating any lead that came forward. In fact, they interviewed hundreds of people, and their investigation took them as far as Puerto Rico, and they're still stumped. And one of the original investigators, who was a police investigator at the time, is now with the Elkhart County Prosecutor's Office. And before his retirement, this is one of those cases that he really wants to see solved. And we know from past experience that sometimes when we come on the air and we talk about this case and we remind people that it's still unsolved, we're looking for that person that knows something that is ready to come forward.
And there are some tips of information that somebody may have seen something. She was out in the yard working before the bus would have been coming home.
Yes, and there are witnesses, including a mailman, that saw her talking to a man at some point and saw her talking to a woman at some point. So we don't know.
Well, hopefully we can get some more information that can finally break open this cold case. Jeff, thank you so much for being on our show. I'm sure this is still a very troubling thing for you and your family, so we appreciate your time with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and Cindy, if people have a tip, they just need to call the Crime Stopper number.
That's right, 800-342-STOP, 288-STOP. Get on our website, michianacrimestoppers.com, and give us an anonymous tip.
All right, thanks a lot. We'll be back with